As the rent crisis spirals, many landlords say they will never recover. In New York, the eviction moratorium probably will be extended next week. And finally, as the pandemic wanes, many landlords say they will never recover. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. Alright, so I have another interesting article for you today, but before we get started, please hit the subscribe and the like button, and I will keep bringing you this great content for landlords and about real estate investing. So, the article I have for you today says New York's ban on evictions will be extended next week. So apparently up in New York, the state of New York, the eviction moratorium was set to end, and they're already working out an extension, and it's going to be extended who knows how long, probably until at least the pandemic has waned so much that they feel that it's time finally to let this go. But you know, it was hard to evict people before the pandemic began, and right now it's absolutely impossible. A lot of landlords out there, small landlords, are struggling, and they're just not going to make it months and months longer. So hopefully, if they do extend it, it's for a very short period of time. And you know, if they extend it any longer than that, then there's a lot of landlords who just are going to fail. So anyway, let's get into this article. An extension of the state's ban on residential evictions for tenants who have struggled during the pandemic is set to be extended on Monday as the aftershocks of the crisis continue. But landlords, especially those who own a modest number of properties, remain restive and are pushing for the release of billions of dollars in federal aid meant to help them. Yeah, these landlords, they need that aid. Okay, stop extending the eviction moratorium without providing aid to landlords. Okay, stop doing that. It doesn't make any logical sense. Yeah, we're going to force you to not be able to accept or to get rid of tenants who aren't paying rent. But at the same time, we're not going to send you any aid. We're not going to offer you any sort of help or do anything for you. You just have to drown in debt on your own. The logic is, well, these are super rich landlords. They've got plenty of money. They got money piles over here. They deserve, because they're all evil, they deserve to go through this crisis. They need to be providing free housing. Well, here's the thing, okay? No matter what anyone believes, this is not a socialist country, okay? That means that we run on capitalist systems, and there's strong property rights here, okay? And that means that it is okay for us to charge money for someone to use our goods and our services, okay? And the simple fact is that that's all landlords are doing. They are providing a good and a service, and that's housing to people. And they are paying for it. And it is okay if they make a profit. It is okay. Oh my goodness, it is okay. The ban has been in place first through executive order and later by a state law, and is estimated to have helped 40,000 tenants stay in their homes, said Assemblyman Jeff Dinowitz, a Democrat from the Bronx. That suggests tens of thousands of people have been impacted, he said. We can't let them homeless. It's really that simple. Yeah, I don't doubt in a city of nearly 8 million people that 40,000 people have been prevented from being evicted during the eviction moratorium. What I do doubt is that all 40,000 of those people would have been homeless. They would have either moved on to a property they could afford, they would have moved in with relatives or, friends or someone to help them. They would have moved into shelters if necessary, right? And that's the truth, okay? They would have moved on. Instead, they are basically forming encampments inside other people's properties, taking goods and services from them and requiring those other people to pay for it, almost as though they were a charity. And landlords don't operate as charities. Okay, so if the government wants to provide housing for the people, they need to build the housing and pay for everything themselves. They can't force other people to provide free housing. Okay, that's wrong. It simply put is the worst abuse of property rights in my lifetime. The legislative action on Monday will help both renters and their landlords, as more than $2 billion in federal aid is waiting to be dispersed for property owners who have been affected by the pandemic themselves, he said. We want to make sure the tenants can stay home, and we want to make sure property owners can be made whole to the greatest extent possible, and that's what this massive infusion of federal money will do, Dinowitz said. Landlords like Ima Smith of the Albany area haven't been pleased with the current moratorium, as rent has gone unpaid for months. I wouldn't be happy with that either. Why do a lot of the assemblymen or other politicians, they believe that, the best thing to do would be to keep people in their homes, right? Which that might be the case in certain scenarios. However, when you have people who realize the laws and realize that they can abuse the system, they will do everything they can in order to basically steal from landlords, okay? They will steal the landlord's properties and stay in them as long as possible. Imagine, okay, you're a tenant, you're trying to abuse the system. You know that the landlord has to continue to provide maintenance. The landlord can't turn off your utilities, can't do any unlawful eviction stuff. The landlord can't evict you at all, okay? And all you have to do is fill out a little declaration form. So you turn in that little declaration form, guess what? You have been able to stay in your apartment for free since last March. We're talking about 14, 15 months at this point, okay? So 14, 15 months, let's say you even have a cheap apartment. It's $1,000 a month rent. You've just saved 15 grand. Wow, Meanwhile, you're getting, let's say you did lose your job. You're getting unemployment benefits. You're getting the federal government also provided a supplement to the unemployment. Okay, we've had 3 different stimulus checks. Okay, you've gotten all 3 of those. On top of that, you've probably also gotten a tax return for the year 2020. Okay, and so you're getting a tax refund. You're floating around with thousands of dollars, not having to pay any rent. Maybe you're getting utilities for free as well. You're doing good. And all you had to do was fill out one little paper form. So yeah, there is a incentive for some tenants to lie. There's an incentive for some tenants to just completely take advantage of the situation. And without realizing this fact, a lot of politicians just keep pushing this forward, and they created no consequences and no evidence needed to prove that you are indeed financially impacted by the situation. I have an interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of Crane's New York Business, and it says, Rent Crisis Spirals for Landlords Awaiting $47 billion in Relief. As everyone knows, we were expecting to get some sort of stimulus money to help us get through these rough times with the eviction moratoriums and everything going on right now. And in a lot of cases, landlords have not been able to get access to those funds. So instead of helping us, all they're doing is telling us to tread water, and hopefully we survive until those funds become available, if they become available to anyone. So let's get into this article. More than a year since COVID-19 lockdowns put millions of apartment dwellers out of work, almost $47 billion in U.S. government rent relief is hitting the streets. For many landlords, it's coming much too slowly. Joaquin Villanueva, an airport janitor who owns a 3-unit rental house in East Boston, had to take out a home equity loan just to pay the bills. One tenant, 8 months behind on rent, vanished one night in March. An unemployed restaurant dishwasher in another unit owes $5,000. Well, here's a good example of a small mom and pop landlord right there, okay? This guy's an airport janitor as his full-time job, and was able to afford a 3-unit building that he rents out probably the other 2 units and lives in one. So that's a good example of a small mom and pop landlord who's struggling through the times right now. And it makes no sense whatsoever to lump this guy in with corporate entities that have billions of dollars worth of real estate. This guy's living in his own property and, is dealing with a bad tenant. And it's possible that he might not be able to pay his mortgage when the tenant is unable to pay. So he risks losing his own home due to these eviction moratoriums. So I don't like eviction moratoriums in the cases of small landlords, or in any landlords, honestly, because you put these rules up on the big landlords and they always trickle down to the smaller ones. While the government passed sweeping measures last year to prevent mass homelessness among renters, there was no targeted help for mom and pop property owners who provide much of America's affordable housing. Like their tenants, these landlords are more likely to be non-white or to be immigrants using real estate for their economic foothold. Now mortgage maintenance and tax bills are piling up, putting landlords in danger of losing their buildings or being forced to sell to wealthier investors hunting for distressed deals. The tens of billions of dollars that Congress allocated for rent relief starting in December, and then with a second allotment in March, was supposed to be helped by covering back rent and unpaid utility bills. But the rollout has been moving at the speed of bureaucracy, which varies from state to state. The speed of bureaucracy is slow, period. It doesn't really matter what state you're in. Yeah, some are a little bit less slow than the other ones, but slow in general, okay? And that's just not going to be anything that's getting to landlords in a short amount of time, okay? This is the typical thing that happens when you're talking about government relief. It's going to be super slow. It's going to require a ton of paperwork. It's going to be extremely hard and difficult to get straight answers from anybody. And a lot of people are just going to give up in frustration, okay? So yeah, I don't like these sort of government programs. Instead, I just want the evictions to resume as normal, especially now as things are getting back to normal with all the vaccinations and everything, and the infection rates going down, and everything else going on. There's little data showing that what share of landlords are in desperate situations, but it doesn't take much to fall behind if income stops coming from one tenant in a small building. With each passing month, the problems get bigger and harder to resolve or to solve. Many landlords don't qualify for federal COVID-19 mortgage forbearance because less than a third have mortgages backed by Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or another federal agency. And local governments can't afford to forego property taxes, especially in cities that have been hard hit by the pandemic. Yeah, you think that's funny. Local governments can't afford to forego property taxes, but they sure can force a landlord to forego rent. Now, that's quite hypocritical on the terms of these local governments, okay? If we're not getting paid, we can't pay you. That's the way it should work, okay? And I just don't believe in telling somebody, hey, you have to pay your property taxes, but we're going to make it so that you can't collect any rent. Well, where do you think the property tax money's coming from? I mean, I really want to ask the city council, where do you think property tax money comes from? Okay, do you think I have a magic well of money that, I can suddenly bestow upon the cities to give them the property tax income? No, I get my property tax money from rental income, from the money that my tenants pay me when they stay in my property. Therefore, if I do not have rental income because there is an eviction moratorium, then guess what? I cannot pay my property taxes. And if I cannot pay my property taxes, your city is going to get nothing. That's the way it is, period. Okay? And there are no exceptions to that rule. If you haven't already done so, go ahead, hit that subscribe and like button, and I'm going to keep bringing you great news from all over the country about real estate investing and landlord news. So the next article I have for you says, as pandemic threat wanes, some landlords say they may never recover. I've talked to a great deal of landlords ever since I started this channel, and the funny thing is that all of us, we seem to be in the same boat, all over the country. You could be on the East Coast, West Coast, in the Midwest, and South. It doesn't really matter. Simply put, eviction moratoriums have been put in place all throughout the country, and we're struggling right now. And the only thing I could say is they have to end at some point. I've shown in different articles that I've posted that, hey, from Texas to New York to California to Nevada, everywhere, right? The governments that are in place are not helping landlords like we need to be helped, okay? So it's really kind of scary thinking that If this continues to go on, there's going to be a lot of us who are going to be forced into, foreclosure, bankruptcy, and other bad financial situations. Even pushing some landlords as far as being into homelessness. So let's hope that it doesn't go that far for many landlords. So anyway, let's get into this article. As access to vaccinations becomes widespread, curfews are lifted, and mask requirements eased, the COVID-19 danger that's been with New Yorkers for more than a year is beginning to lift. Local Republican lawmakers, however, said Wednesday there's one group for whom conditions aren't getting better, but worse: property owners and landlords. Yeah, and I don't think that they should put a political twist on this. Republican lawmakers up in New York are the ones who are going to try to stand up for landlords. Unfortunately, the Democratic lawmakers, they don't seem to care as much about what's going on with landlords. And the truth is that there's a lot of Republicans and Democrats who own property, who rent those properties out and provide housing for people. Okay, so there's landlords on both sides of the aisle. So that's why this shouldn't be a political issue. And it is, unfortunately. So a lot of people who are more, socialist, they tend to be Democrats. And so when you have a more socialist group, they tend to really look down upon landlords, and they really want to restrict what we can do. They really want to, stick it to, the rich people, and they think that landlords are all rich, not realizing that there's a huge number of mom and pop landlords, smaller landlords who are just middle class, and we're just trying to get by. So let's get into this article more and figure out what's going on. The pandemic has had serious financial impacts, and we recognized the impacts have been felt on both sides, said Assembly Minority Leader Will Barclay during a press conference with other GOP lawmakers and industry advocates. But this bill fails to do that. The bill in question is a provision to extend the state's eviction moratorium, part of a large aid package initially composed in 2020 and reworked or renewed several times to help struggling tenants facing COVID-19 related hardship. Without protection, the state is facing a looming housing disaster, Barclay said. Many landlords have reached a breaking point. Yeah, the focus has been on the tenants and not on the landlords, and not what's actually going to help the landlords. Unfortunately, a lot of the eviction moratoriums, the only thing they're going to do is drag on the pain for both tenants and landlords, because at the end of the day, what's really going to happen is the eviction moratorium will end, and a lot of landlords will immediately file for just tens of thousands of evictions will be filed immediately as soon as these eviction moratoriums end. And it doesn't matter when they end. You can extend them a year from now, and the second they end, tens of thousands of evictions will be filed. Okay, that's the way it's going to happen. And at the same time, telling the landlord that they have to sit here for a year or longer without receiving any rent from tenants, that's crazy. So the landlords are going to want to get that money back. And if they have to file claims in court in order to, try to recover those funds from tenants, especially these large landlords who have teams of lawyers working for them, they are going to sue. They're going to go after wages. They're going to go after everything they can from tenants to try to make themselves whole again. So, yeah, it's a disaster if they don't provide any relief or enough relief for these landlords, okay? Governor Cuomo on Wednesday announced the state's food and beverage curfew would end for outdoor dining on May 17th and indoor dining on May 31st. The governor also announced the state's vaccination sites would begin accepting walk-in patients of any age. Health officials reported Wednesday afternoon more than 1.1 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine had been administered in the past 7 days. While many aspects of society are getting back to normal at a welcome, if not a little surprising rate, some housing providers say their very real financial and property losses aren't getting the same attention from Albany. Yeah, and that's the truth. are relaxing restrictions on other businesses, and they're not doing anything for landlords to really help them get through all of this mess. And it's not surprising. I mean, just the way that they expect a lot of landlords to be wealthier. And it's just one of those things where they are trying to push more towards the socialism side, especially in states like New York. And I don't like it. I don't like it at all. There's nothing that we can really do about it. And what happens in New York, it's a reflection of what's going to happen all over the country. That's why it's so important to me to see what they're doing up there, okay? It's one of the biggest states in the entire country, and it has the biggest city in the entire country in it. And if they don't do well, if landlords in New York don't do well, that's going to be hurtful to things that are happening all over the U.S.